Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Man vs. Violin. Today is day 1162. That's 1162 days of playing the violin every single day. Why? Because that's what Paganini would do. But today I have something that Paganini did not know about. In fact, if Paganini had heard about it, he would have been very, very shocked. Today, I'm going to be reviewing my Glasser carbon fiber violin. So this is, like I said, a carbon fiber violin from the Glasser company. I wanted a violin that was a little bit more durable than a traditional wooden violin. I live in a very, very hot part of Northern California, and it's not uncommon for temperatures to be over 100 degrees. In the summertime, it can get over 110 degrees. If your musical instrument isn't in a climate-controlled environment, say you have it in the trunk of your car, or you're out playing a gig in a park, your instrument could be subjected to a lot of heat. And I didn't want an instrument like a violin that has a lot of glue, and then the glue would come undone and the fingerboard would come off. So I wanted something a little bit more rugged, and I opted for the Glasser carbon composite AE violin. So you can see the carbon weave here pretty well. It's black. I chose all black, but the company has a lot of different colors. I think the black looks pretty cool. The fingerboard, the neck, and the scroll are all a carbon composite, as is the tailpiece and the chin rest. They're all carbon composite as well. I have an Everest shoulder rest on it. However, the feet are not Everest feet. The Everest feet are too thick and they wouldn't fit properly on the violin. So I had kind of a leftover generic shoulder rest that I swapped the feet out for. And the screws fit perfectly in the Everest shoulder rest. So that's what I have there. The entire instrument is carbon fiber except for the bridge. It's a Despou bridge. And I think you can see in there the sound peg, the sound post, is also wood. There is a bass bar that's carbon fiber, and you can't really see it very well, but it's in there. So this violin, I like it very much. I've had it about 3 weeks now. There's lots that I like about it, but there's one thing that I don't like about it, and I'll talk about that after we listen to it. Before we listen to it, I've heard some people saying that they feel the violin is too heavy for them. So I don't have a scale that can weigh in ounces, but just subjectively holding the two instruments, I don't really notice a big weight difference between the two. I imagine that the carbon fiber violin is maybe a little bit heavier, but just the violin compared to a wooden violin, they're very similar in weight. Where that might be different, though, is if you have electronics. If you have either passive or active electronics on your violin that sit at the end of the body, I imagine that that does get a little heavier, especially resting on your shoulders. I deliberately went for a violin with no electronics, which is why I had to order this directly from the Glasser company. I'm no stranger to electronics. I have a storage area full of amps and speakers and pedals. Oh my goodness, do I have pedals and all kinds of electronic amplification stuff for my bass and my basses. So if I want to add amplification to this at a later time, I can do that. But for right now, I just wanted a very basic carbon fiber violin. So people ask about the sound. The sound is different from a wooden violin, but it's not bad, it's just different. And the best way I can explain that is think about walking into a carpeted room and talking. And then you walk into a room with hardwood floors or tile floors and then talk. So it's that kind of difference. The carpeting absorbs sound, some of the echoing, some of the sound, whereas the hardwood floor doesn't absorb it, kind of reflects it. So that's kind of what's happening with the two violins. Playing a traditional wood violin is like walking and talking in a carpeted room. The wood in the violin absorbs some of the overtones and it gives it a more warm sound. The carbon fiber violin is more like walking into a room with tile floors or hardwood flooring. The carbon fiber doesn't absorb sound, it reflects it. So it makes it a little bit more echoey than a wooden violin. This violin does have a lot of punch to it though. I played it outside and you can hear it from quite a fair distance. So it's got a lot of volume to it just by itself without any amplification. So let's listen to the two and see if you can hear a difference. I'll start with the carbon fiber violin and then play the exact same piece with a wooden violin. For both pieces, I'll be using the same bow. So it's a Coda bow, the Coda SX bow, and it's also carbon fiber. And I'll use the same bow on both violins and both pieces. All right, so that was Memory by Andrew Lloyd Webber. And maybe you could hear a little bit of a difference between how the carbon composite violin sounded, which to me on my end sounded a lot punchier, but a little more echoey as compared to the wooden violin that sounded warmer, but a little bit softer. So, as I said, I like everything about this violin. It's a fantastic violin. It's well built. I went over it literally with a magnifying glass. I also went over it with ultraviolet light. I have a UV light that I use to look for any cracks or any areas where an instrument's been patched or some imperfection in the finish. This violin passed the UV light test. There's no imperfections at all. It's a well-made instrument, and I can't notice any flaws. The neck is extremely smooth. It's well built, well put together. Everything about it, I give an A+ to, except one thing. So the one thing I do not like about this violin is if you look at the headstock and if you look at the nut, so the nut is this area here where the strings come into the fingerboard. This nut is part of the neck and part of the headstock. It's all one piece. So in my case, the slots for the strings were cut well. There's no issue with them. I don't get any, there's no area on the neck where there's any vibration or I feel that the strings are sitting too low. But if you were to get a nut that was cut too low, there's nothing you could do about it. Whereas a traditional instrument, the nut is separate from the headstock and the neck and the fingerboard. So if you see on this violin, this nut, it can be removed. So if this nut were cut incorrectly, it would be a minor inconvenience. I could take it to a luthier, or I could do it myself, quite honestly, and recut the nut. I've cut an untold number of nuts for guitars and basses. It's not a difficult procedure. It's better to be a little too shallow. You can always take off a little bit more. If it's cut too deeply, that's going to be an issue. But as I said, with a traditional violin, if you don't like the way the nut is, you can have that swapped out. Whereas with the Glasser carbon composite violin, the nut is part of the neck and the fingerboard. And if that bad boy is not cut perfectly, you're going to have intonation issues and you're going to have vibrating strings. Like I said, in my case, it's fine. The nut was cut perfectly. But that's kind of an issue that you cannot make any adjustments to the nut on this instrument. It's what you get is what you get. That being said, I'm very pleased with this instrument. I think it's a great instrument. If you're looking for a very durable, practically indestructible, weatherproof, heatproof, rainproof violin, then you can't go wrong with this. I think it's a wonderful instrument, and Glasser makes high quality instruments, and I'm very happy to add this to my violin collection. So that's it for week 166, day 1162, practicing the violin every single day. Why? Because that's what Paganini would do. Thank you, and see you next time.